Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, Module Leader for TECH2503 Community Media Production, and this is an overview of the topics that we'll cover in the 9th lecture. I've produced the PowerPoint slides. I've got some images and some diagrams and some video clips in there, so I won't share the PowerPoint slides, but I will share the notes which are up and available on the DMU Commons wiki. So if you go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and you search for the TECH2503 page, just look for the lecture notes section. And they're there with an indication of what reading you can do associated with this lecture. We're drawing this from the Stephen Moore book, the Pragmatic Sustainability book, which is, and we're looking at chapter 12, which is coal and Robinson and Westerhoff, and they're talking about regenerative sustainability and the idea of localized neighborhood sustainability practices. You might also want to read, as a kind of background contrast to this, the Kevin Howley book, the Understanding Community Media, and look at the chapter 11, which is Maria Googleite. Probably got that wrong, and it's about how Aboriginal artwork in Australia is understood. So you go from this kind of local to global, so you've got this sense of people understanding the context of things that are produced locally within a global environment, and that'll be useful for what we want to talk about next week. So the issues that we're going to cover are thinking about the issue of sustainability is something that's run through all of the lectures that we've done so far. We've thought about, last week we talked about the idea of the Great Disruption and some of the really significant changes, economic changes, social changes, climate changes that are going to be affecting us in the future, and particularly how your generation is going to have to pick up the pieces for this and figure out ways to develop a social model that works in the future and that doesn't rely on the failed thinking of the past, if you like. So our idea is to think about this as either sustainability or as an idea about resilience. And this takes the argument a little bit further, and it asks the idea about, well, if it's more than just sustainability, if it's more than just predicting and providing what we'll need in the future and finding a source for those needs where we can meet those needs, how can we make our communities resilient locally, and how can they, if you like, generate and regenerate for themselves and on their own terms? So it's an interesting idea about, I think it's really important that we consider this on the basis of where community media fits, because often community media is excluded from any of the kind of debates about social regeneration, about economic or ecological regeneration. It doesn't seem to figure in urban planning. It doesn't seem to figure in social planning. It's there, but it's not kind of a driving force, if you like. So we'll look at some of the reasons of the ways that we can think about regeneration, and the way that we can look at how regeneration is articulated and understood. But then at the same time, we'll be asking the question constantly as we go along, where's community media in this? So we're looking at this in terms of a series of processes, social processes that are mapped out in kind of key issues. And this is things like which we've covered, if you like. This reinforces this notion, the kind of way that community media is something which is interdisciplinary. It's also something that kind of emerges from conversations. It's something that's part of a development process. It's something that looks for outcomes that are kind of positive outcomes, and the process that drives those outcomes. So it asks the question, what's different about the way that we're doing things? And a lot of this is about how we develop interpersonal relationships and how we reframe some of the social relationships that we have to make them inclusive and make them participative, so that people feel that they have a voice within their communities that's recognised within the politics, and it's not just something which is done by elites or by wealthy developers or by technicians or bureaucrats, but it's something that includes people, because the argument is this model of regeneration is more sustainable. It has a longer lasting impact in the future. So this is kind of about what is called reframing the goals of development. So we'll look at the way that kind of this develops around a integrated and participatory process. Participation is a big, important component of community media and how we think about it. We think about how we bring about change and the kind of strategies for change that community media might encourage, but also thinking about kind of how scale. So one of the focuses for this session is to think about neighbourhoods and change on the basis of small localities, and kind of we've got some examples from Leicester and Leicester's regeneration of thinking about how communities can be grown and developed around more of a sense of neighbourliness, more of a sense of the kind of ad hoc interactions that you get from living in a local area. So there's some lessons from Leicester's regeneration that we can look at and think about, and kind of this what happens drives the kind of neighbourhood scale argument and the kind of cohesiveness that comes from a recognisable sense of neighbourliness is the idea of social trust and how people interact and interrelate on the basis that they are they recognise that it's better for them to engage with each other in a trusting way rather than a kind of antagonistic and untrusting way. So it becomes something which is more dynamic and less segmented and kind of compartmentalised. So we'll look at this in some examples and kind of ask the question in a way. I suppose we come up with the question is, why do neighbourhoods matter? And therefore, why does community media matter? Because community media is can be at the level of neighbourhoods and kind of the local, which is something we'll go on to think about later on. So yes, if the notes are up available on the wiki, if you want to read them in advance, there's some other reading there about localising development reports, which there's a link to on the wiki as well. If not, I'll see you on Thursday at the lecture.